And welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to another episode of Get the Mic, the only show where your hosts on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, we're talking about episode 60 of Dragon Ball, which is the Kamehameha wave versus the Dodonpa.
The Dodon Ray.
Donon Ray in the translation, yes.
The Dodonpa.
Now, we've been covering these very mythological episodes so far in this last, let's say, third of the arc. And as we get into the beginning here, I do want to address some things, try and narrow our focus.
Yeah.
Any other housekeeping stuff we need to address before we get into the episode?
No,
Brock.
I think that we can just kind of get straight into these scenes because this is what it's really about.
Do we have another myth and movies in the works? What's our next myth and movie?
Well, we'll have to decide before we say. I have some ideas.
Okay. Well, be on the lookout for that because we are planning on doing some type of either long recording, like a premiere, or doing a live stream for the next Myth and Movies 2. Might be something for the season, but I don't know. There's nothing really coming up for that.
We would be interested to hear anyone's suggestions for that. Some of my ideas, right? Matrix, Wizard of Oz. We've talked about a few different ones.
Like a Wizard of Oz one. That would be good.
There are several, One of my suggestions is maybe like a group episode of a few of the Harry Potter books.
Maybe we'll put a few up in the polls. Polls are popular, apparently. So, yeah, I will. I'll look into that. Do a poll. See what our fans want.
You can go and check that information out also at our Discord.
We will make sure the poll is up by the time this episode airs.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
All right, let's go ahead and get started then. So the first thing we see is kind of a recap of what happened last time. Mercenary Tao Pai Pai has arrived in the land of Korin, and immediately he challenges Goku, who is defended by Bora here. And Bora is no match for Tao Pai Pai, who uses his own spear to kill him. Even to Goku's, let's say, his attempt to stop it. Despite his attempt to stop it.
Right, his late attempt, right? Because there's, you had mentioned before there's also that element of Goku not stepping up to fight Tao Pai Pai, but instead allowing Bora to stand in and fight against him when it's not really his battle to fight, right?
Well, and I also think, to clarify that, I think it's because Goku's view of this is more of a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of the games, right? Let's say that he's been playing with the rest of them.
Well, also, he sees that Bora is good, and so he sort of just interprets him as being good enough, right, in his interpretation of goodness, to beat a Red Ribbon soldier. In that conception, that's very limited, right?
Right, he doesn't have a full understanding of what Tao represents, and so he allows Bora to go up against it. And let's just clarify, I think this is a good time to clarify exactly what these representations are. So, of course, throughout this entire arc, we've had the manifestations of the psychology of each of these, let's say, leaders or members of the Red Ribbon Army. So we had Major Metallotron being a manifestation of white, even Ninja Murasaki, as well as blue. We've had Fat Hitler be a manifestation of blue psyche, and all of them can contribute towards a larger hierarchy of hierarchies in Commander Red. So to say we have the beginning of the arc with Muscle Tower, we have General White, who represents thuggery, like we said, like bullies, a bullying spirit, let's say.
Right, and imagine his tower versus, let's say, Korin's tower. Right.
Yes.
So we're introducing from the very beginning a scaling of height of spirit, right?
Mm-hmm. And so we have thuggery, and then we have blue, which is disgust, the power of disgust. Blue's power comes from his ability to discern what is good and what is, let's say, useful and not useful by his sense of disgust. And so that is also an element of Red. Red is disgusted by himself. And now we have Malice in the form of Tao. And Tao is the last element that we need to understand the manifestation of Commander Red. And we're going to see how Commander Red's spirit plays out in the next few episodes. But I just wanted to distill all of that down here to say that the malice exhibited by the pathological spirit of Red is able to easily overcome the traditional spirit of the Father in the sense that it can extinguish it from being. It can't extinguish, and there's a reason why, we'll go into it in a minute. It can't necessarily extinguish the propagation of that, but it can extinguish the instantiation of it.
It can tyrannize it in that sense. I would say there's an element where you could say, trying to distill it down, but it's essentially this. I lost it. I was trying to come up with a good wording of what you said. Say the last sentence that you said. Maybe we can trim this down.
I was saying that the malice manifest in
Right.
Tao is
So this is the malice that General Red's exploits can buy, right? So this is sort of an evaluation of all of the malice of all of his deeds, sort of combined into a point, right?
However,
the point of the spear, so to speak.
However, it's not, yes, point of the spear, but it's not something that he can control readily as he can with his
it doesn't
disgust
answer to him, right?
and his thuggery, right? And that's the two. White and blue are really the keystones in White's or not White, in Red's do I want to say persona or his character, let's say. And so this part of him here, which is manifest in Tao, is not necessarily as controlled as the others. And malice tends to be that way. Malice is rampant. It's a very destructive force. And so we see it destroy here. Very first thing it does is it encounters the traditional paternal spirit and destroys it outright.
Right. And I really like the way that we had tied that in as well in the last episode with the pink kill you clothing that he has on him. That's very much sort of tied into that understanding of himself. He's come to terms with his nature in that sense. And so he's very integrated. He has integrated his worship in that sense, right? He's sworn himself to that spirit of death.
Yes. And so and it's not just death though. It's malice. It's that joy, because
well, I would say that in the act of doing that, you do become malicious, right?
If you see, the only time that so far, as soon as Tao has arrived on his pillar, the only time we see him smile is when he throws the spear to kill Bora.
Right. That's what animates him, right?
Yes.
Killing, death. Well,
yes.
To kill, right? The internalization of that malice, which is to kill or murder rather than just sort of the idea of death itself. But it's a targeted death, you know.
It's a malicious death.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's malice. Exactly what he is, and but it is, like you said, purchased malice.
It is,
which is something we have to acknowledge, because the true malice that comes from the spirit of the adversary will come into play later in this show, in this series. But right now, it's just the purchased idea of it.
Yeah, and we'll expand on that as we get more into what Tao's up to following what just happened in this last episode.
There he goes. He smiles right there.
Yeah.
So this is the Kamehameha versus the Dodonpa. This is after all that. After he does kill Bora, Goku charges him and is ready to do battle. So as they fight, Goku realizes pretty quickly that regular means won't work. That he's pretty strong. He charges him several times and gets kicked back, and then he gets knocked out. Should probably use my notes. He gets knocked out by a headbutt. That's not the right one. Hold on. Whoa.
So yeah, he basically holds his hands and headbutts him and knocks him out, then throws him against Korin Tower, right? And so this would be the second time he slammed him into the tower, right? So
Yeah,
I think
throwing him
that's
into the pillar. Yeah, the first time he kicks him. Actually, yeah, he kicks
yeah,
him the first time, he knocks him in the tower. Second time, he knocks him in the tower. It's almost spelling out what he needs to do in a foreshadowing way, right?
right. And he's sort of acting as a force to teach him that, and also in the sense that he's faster than Goku, right? He can't keep up with him. He can't even catch his feet, right? He literally gets down on hands and knees and tries to catch his feet, and he cannot keep up with him, right?
Right, and it's because he is in a mode of being that can see more than Goku can see. He can take in more than Goku can. And
Right.
so when he knocks him against the pillar, it's saying, this is how you
This is how
can
you
see
can
more.
challenge me.
Yes, this is how you can challenge me.
And I also like here you see it wham, he hits him with his ponytail, right? Call it a ponytail, right? Or a braid, but it's a tail, right? He has his own tail. It's not
Yes,
like Goku's tail. It's one that he's fashioned for himself
from discipline.
from discipline,
But
right?
disciplined malice, that's what this is,
Yeah.
right?
So, but I like that the way he uses it and he treats it is he whips Goku with it in the same way that Goku has done the exact same thing where he's whipped his tail down on top of
And
his opponent's
Goku
head.
show. Goku is so shocked that he scurries away animalistically.
Right, because that is I think is what it represents, right? It's like
Yeah, definitely.
he has encountered that animalistic thing that he's sworn himself to, right, in his vestments, in his like chaotic, animalistic, shadow oriented nature that he's integrated into himself. And so yeah, it threatens Goku and he shrugs back almost in the way that like you could say Black does, right? Where he's like he recognizes something really really malicious in him.
Yeah, definitely. It is that, and it's, let's say, akin to when Honest John and Gideon the cat realize that the coachman in Pinocchio really has malicious intent behind
Mhm.
him, and they're too far in to turn back. And Goku is also too far in to turn back, though he is not a foolish adversarial spirit. He's not trying to adopt the adversarial spirit, but rather go against it. And he is overwhelmed by the amount of power that malice brings.
Mhm. It's also it's a negative against him, right? Because Goku's you could say that what he's sworn himself to is very uh for being, right? It's pro being. It's to celebrate being and find a way to live that essentially is will elevate being for everyone around you as well, right? And then he comes into into an encounter with a spirit that is actively diametrically opposed to that orientation. And he really hasn't come up against that so far. Everything has been really self-serving, right? Not against somebody else in that truly malicious sense.
Right, and it's to say that Tao's spirit is further than that of someone who's just following orders or bullies, or let's say even rules with disgust as
This
a
is how
primary
he's
factor.
chosen to make his living, right?
Yes, this is the spirit he's decided to embody, and the fact that he also takes pride in the spirit that he embodies here is important, because he has gone around saying he's the world's greatest assassin. He's maintained his image that way.
Right. He's who Ninja Murasaki imagines he could be.
Exactly. And that's why I like that, what I brought up in the beginning about that, um all all of the generals and Tao are a manifestation of red and a higher order of being,
Right.
right?
Well, we're theoretically ascending that tower as we're getting more and more articulated
both
manifestations of them.
Goku is both ascending the tower, and the story itself is ascending a
Right.
hierarchy at the same time, and it's so sublime that they line up that way. It blows my mind how well this show is written. So let's continue. We next see that to Tao's surprise, Goku rises and approaches him again. This time, Goku uses the Kamehameha wave against Tao, who blocks the energy blast. Only destroying his clothes, Goku is caught off guard by an energy blast by Tao, the Dodon Ray. Seemingly dead, Goku falls to the ground while Tao collects the Dragon Balls and leaves on the pillar on which he rode to get here. Additionally, before Goku falls to the ground, the Noibo, the power pole, falls before he does.
Right. We see by itself the Noibo collapses to the ground, and then Goku enters the frame afterwards.
So, why do you think Tao can withstand the Dodon Ray? I mean,
Well,
wow, okay. Good one. Good one. Why do you think Tao can withstand the Kamehameha?
because Tao's much more integrated, and the truth that he can speak, let's say, is more in line with his true orientation. That means that he is, when I say integrated, he's more aware of his own aim. And we see him display his aim with the attack when he points directly at Goku and he says, Dodonpa, right? And he does it in reaction to his vestments being destroyed, right? His outer garment. So it reveals him to be what he really is. So he has the facade of being a professional killer and that he does it for money. When Goku sort of brings the truth out of him, or by speaking to what his mode of being begets, reveals him by removing the facade that he's put onto himself as being what he really is, which is malicious and against being. And so, because he has now been revealed as malicious, right, as being that Luciferian, almost like adversarial spirit, he points at Goku because that's where his aim really is to kill, right? Not to make the money, but to actually be an adversary.
Yeah, I actually want to bring up something that I've been thinking about recently. I'm a big Rolling Stones fan, and when I was listening to Sympathy for the Devil again in my car on my way to work, I was thinking about what exactly the lyrics mean when they say, pleased to meet you, hope you guess my name, but what's puzzling you is the nature of my game, right? And here it's pretty understandable that Tao is doing this for monetary gain. But
Right.
he obviously takes joy in dismantling being. And that's where that malice element comes in, right? And so that part of it, as I think what you were saying, it's kind of uncomprehendable for good people to understand that spirit of malice. And so the truth of the matter is that malice is not destroyable in that manner. And it does, the Kamehameha wave, that is, it does reveal Tao's spirit in the malicious sense that it is. And instead of just the doing it simply for monetary gain, right?
Right.
And so then he uses the Dodon Ray because then it's revealed that focused maliciousness against the hero, and especially since it's already destroyed the paternal spirit in this land traditionally, is able to inflict mortal damage to the heroic spirit and separate it from the ancestral boon which Goku has inherited, which is the Noibo.
Right. It's like cutting him off at his knees, right? It's separating him from it and almost symbolically making him earn it again, right? It's making him grapple with the concept of it again, you could say, and it being that pillar.
Well, let's say this. Let's say I want to be specific. The reason the malice of the adversarial spirit undercuts the spirit of the ancestor is that the spirit of malice propagates throughout time infinitely as the spirit of the ancestor continually fails to extinguish its existence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, the Noibo has to fall before Goku falls to the ground as well. Now,
Well, it's to say that it's that eternal.
well, hold on, because let me finish.
Sure.
Because the answer to that is why Goku eventually does what he does, and we'll get to that in a second. So let's just leave it at that because we're gonna get to
Right.
in just a
Well,
second.
before we get into that, it is that eternal adversarial spirit that it's almost like it's manifest from heroism, and we see this kind of archetypally across many stories, but it's almost to say that this isn't something that Goku's master's mode of being could have prevented from existing.
Right. It doesn't matter what your ancestors and the great achievements they've had. The adversarial spirit of malice and that which will go in that spirit is propagated still even today.
Right. And so
And
I
so
think
it's
that's
not like a dragon, which the chaos has been conquered by ancestral spirits.
well, it's like an eternal dragon, right?
Right. It's a dragon that supersedes dragons. It's the next hierarchy of that. And so the Noibo is powerless to stop Mercenary Tao. However, and I think we'll get into it in just a second, right? Actually, we'll get into that in just a second. Let's continue because we need to talk about the fallout of this, and then we'll get back to Goku.
Right.
So immediately after this, at Red Ribbon headquarters, Red is pleased with the results of his mercenary. However, Tao is not traveling back to headquarters, instead visiting a nearby town in search of a tailor. He tells Red he will return in 3 days, but also that Goku is dead. Red tells him that he will send a soldier to get the Dragon Ball that Tao left behind, since Goku no longer poses a threat.
So when we first saw Tao, he was very formal in the way he introduced himself, right? He introduced himself by his title as the world's greatest assassin at your service. Very, very business-like in a sense, right? And there's this aspect of Tao where he's efficient. He's always to the point, you could say. He's always he doesn't waste any time. I'll put it that way. And so, in that sense, he's very business-like. Now, it's interesting then that he will not go back to Red until he has his outer garments back for him, so that he can control his image. And that's kind of why I called him orderly before, because there's this aspect to him where he has to be in control of all of himself completely, right? It's so disciplined. It's almost like hyper disciplined, and to the point that he has to keep the facade up between him and Red as to what they're really doing.
Well,
Because Red can't truly confront the malice that he's sending out
manifested here, right?
Right.
And it is it's disciplined at man, I don't even know how to say it. It's like a disciplined adversarial spirit, because let's just take, for example, the Columbine shooters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eric Harris wrote tons and tons of things before he did the things he did. And that is to say that orderly spirit, which compels one to organize the meaning behind one's actions, was manifest clearly in both of the Columbine shooters.
Mm-hmm. There was a clear definition
and that's not to say,
understand
because
the malice.
simple chaos, a simple chaotic being like a dragon, which is a pure manifestation of chaos, is less dangerous than a controlled manifestation of chaos such as that. or even Nurse Ratched, let's say in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
Well,
Nest,
well,
who
let's
hides her malice within the guise of benevolence. She uses her dictates over the patients she controls as, and she says it's for their good. The malice that she's inflicting upon them is for their own good. That's the next step, but for now,
Well, yeah, let's
that's
let's
where we're
compare
at.
him to Robot, right? Because we've compared his vestments to Robot. But think of Robot spraying bullets and spraying a flamethrower and having this chaos manifestation versus Tao Pai Pai, who has who brings a discipline and an orderliness to it and focuses all of that potential into a single point, right? And that's what Tao
He
Pai
can
Pai is able to
also
do because that's what Malice does.
he can also harness the magical words of utterance to force a beam of malice at his adversaries.
Right. But not just at his adversaries, but at their identities.
Well, sure, to challenge their identity, their spirit. That's what all of these things represent when they're used against each other in this
Not
context.
just in that sense, but I would say almost ancestral identity, or you could say attacking that which is even above you.
Well,
So
I
it's
mean,
not
I
just
would say
attacking your spirit; it's attacking that which you hold to be the ideal version of your potential, right? So your master, and that's why he points specifically at the point on Goku's gi, right?
is that
Because he's attacking above Goku's strength. He's
mhm.
attacking at the heart, you could say. The heart of what makes Goku who he is.
Or at least what Goku
Because he's
thinks he
so
is.
able to orient himself, right? He's so accurate in how he focuses his spirit, which is so malicious in that sense. So he points right at the heart of the issue, and he points, which also happens to be the symbol of the turtle hermit.
Well, and right, and that means that he is denigrating the idea of Goku bettering himself to begin with. The idea of training and serving under an idea that is good to Tao is something that he's trying to destroy.
Well, he used to say death supersedes that,
Well,
period.
well, not only that, but there's nothing valuable. The only thing that matters is death, and if you
It's
can,
very nihilistic in that
yes,
sense.
and he can make a profit from it, so he will.
Exactly. It's to bring it down to it's like the person on Reddit telling you like any intuition that there's any spiritual value to life is idiocy because eventually you're just going to be absorbed and break
Right,
apart and there's no such thing as consciousness really
right,
and all of
exactly.
that, right? This is very
And that
anti-being in that
definitely
sense or anti-spirit.
disrupts the cycle of paternal to fraternal, no, not fraternal, to filial spirit, right? That's right, filial?
Familial?
No, filial.
I'm not sure. I don't know filial.
All right, well we'll figure out. Anyways, Tao goes to this
Right.
town here, right? And I do want to mention the drunken men. So the
Mhm.
drunken men at first don't recognize Tao, but everyone else does. And they talk to him, let's say indecently.
They don't recognize him, which is a faux pas for Tao because Tao is so focused on his image and the I don't want to just say image, but the projection of who he is because he's able to project his spirit, right? And so he projects this larger than life persona of himself.
Filial is definitely a word.
All right.
I was just making sure.
White filial.
What are you talking about?
White Phillip.
Okay, White Phillip definitely. Also, so he does talk to Red here, and Red tells him that the Dragon Ball is left behind. Again, Red mentions that he'll send a soldier to go get it because he has faith and the malice he's purchased.
Right. He believes that
And also,
that
let's
mode of
say,
thinking is enough to extinguish that spirit.
I think at this point, there is another thing we need to address. The reason why Red's resources seem endless. So let's talk a little bit about what comprises Red here. We've already talked about his thuggery, his disgust, and his malice, right?
Mhm.
Now, also he has that eye patch. He has, let's say, paid the price, it seems, for some access to wisdom through the loss of his vision. Think Odin,
Right.
right? Things like that.
Right.
So he has those elements going for him. So how do these manifest in the way that they gain almost infinite resources?
It's a big question.
And we might have to save it for, because I
We
think,
will be talking about confronting Red directly soon.
yes, I think that's true. I just wanted to acknowledge the question here. We don't have to answer it now.
Sure. I don't want to get too deep into thinking on the fly about that because I don't want to spoil later analysis.
That's good, but I mean, the reason I bring it up is
Right.
because right now, when Red is talking to Tao and fully believes in his ability, it says things about Red's character. But we'll bring that together towards
Well,
the
it's
end.
also in this scene that he tries to order him
Not yet.
around,
No,
right? Not in this scene?
no.
Okay.
Not yet. That's later. We got to get back to Goku first. But we can.
Continue.
If you're ready. So, back in Korin, excuse me, Upa has raised a mound over his father and starts to bury Goku when he's interrupted by the aforementioned Red Ribbon soldier that's sent by Red. The soldier tries to take the Dragon Ball from Goku's gi, but as a reflex, Goku grabs his hand instead.
Almost as if he's animated by the Dragon Ball.
Yes, and that's definitely so, animated by the spirit of the ancestral.
Mm-hmm.
The soldier then runs back to get a gun, but he misses every shot on Goku and Upa.
Mm-hmm.
Miraculously
Misses on his aim towards Goku each time.
Jumping back, well, I think we'll get into it. Jumping back into his helicopter, he tries to tell headquarters, but Goku flies up on the Nimbus cloud and uses the Noibo to kill him. He kills him. Goku kills a person.
He points the Noibo at him instead of attacking the whole helicopter as he's done in the past. He swung it overhead and attacked the whole manifestation.
No. He
points
him.
it at him this time.
Yes.
And just kills him with it.
And he realized, and this is I would say, before this, Goku has not killed any person. He's knocked them out. Android 8 has killed many.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he killed Booyan, but he's a monster. I mean, people he hasn't killed.
He has knocked people out of the sky.
But after interacting with Tao once, the first thing he does is kill someone.
Right? He has been initiated into that malice now.
And so, let's back up a little bit, because I do want to briefly talk about Bora's mound and how Upa has constructed the mound. So we were talking, Brock and I were talking earlier about the raising of mounds.
Right.
And how that is throughout some American Indian cultures. The mound builders, let's say Mississippi, like those has been a tradition, right? That's where they buried their dead. So raising a mound,
similar to the idea of a sky burial,
tradition.
right?
Right. It's more of that,
but it's
rather
erecting
than
it
underground.
Yes.
And so Upa buries his father there, and I think it's also significant that he begins to bury Goku because Upa's spirit actually has some very enduring qualities here. He chooses to go on instead of running away or doing something else. He pays respect, and it's to show the strength of spirit that was in let's say instantiated in the last episode with the sharpening of the spear.
Mm-hmm.
He, like his father, will continue that noble spirit of goodness in this land.
Right, and it's interesting because we're seeing Upa at a younger age than when we originally saw Goku whenever he was at the shrine to his grandfather, sort of praying to the four-star ball, right? So we didn't see at the time the circumstances of how Goku handled the death of his father figure, right? Now we get to see it for Upa in that he raises a mound to him, or he sort of, and I like it. It's almost like a pyramid or a shrine in that sense. You erect something from the ground that represents them, that's elevated, right? And that's what a shrine is in the same sense. So I like that there's that. We're still keeping that idea connected between Goku and Upa, and so Upa then goes to do it for Goku as well, because also in Upa's innocence, he really wouldn't be able to differentiate whether that nihilistic spirit could destroy the heroic spirit, right? When you're that young and naive, you're very impressionable in that
But
sense.
all he can do, and what he acknowledges that he can do with the spirit of the wisdom of a child, let's
Hmm.
say, is to carry on and continue
And to pay reverence, right?
and to pay proper respect. Exactly. And so when Goku gets up and grabs the soldier's hand, it is that he's animated by the spirit of the ancestral father.
It reaches through him to protect the four-star ball.
Yes. And so and through that it awakens Goku and awakens the spirit of the hero again. And this is something we've seen and can be seen consistently um throughout fiction. Let's say Dumbledore going to find Harry Potter as a baby in the first place, right? That spirit of the ancestral father calls forth the spirit of the hero, nurtures it and protects it and allows it to propagate forth through the future.
That's the proper way that things should
And
be.
think like Gandalf. Gandalf does the same thing for Frodo, let's say.
Right.
I just want to make that established, right? And that's what should happen. And so that's what happens here when
Well, I
Goku
like the
has the
Frodo
thing.
analogy because it's what sets up the situation for Frodo to be able to
No.
separate himself
I
from his
actually like
ancestry, right?
Bilbo better because
Or
this is the
Bilbo.
same thing that happens. Let's say Bilbo gives Frodo the mithril shirt,
Mm-hmm.
which saves him in Moria from a wound from malice.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a perfect way of putting it.
Yes, and so it's Bilbo's spirit, and here it's Grandpa Gohan's spirit, and they're both paternal spirits, even more so because Gandalf is more of a Master Roshi, where Bilbo is actually
Mm-hmm.
he is Grandpa Gohan,
No, that's definitely it. Yeah.
and so it
The
protects him
paternal ancestral
from
and
the
not the
Dodon
spiritual.
Ray,
Yeah.
and allows him to continue and propagate forward.
Yeah. I strongly agree with that.
I,
It,
I agree
uh,
strongly.
no, and it's also magical in that sense, right? Where you've got the mithril shirt is of elven craft, right? Which is to say that it's woven with magic.
Well, and that's the thing too. It is the Bilbo gained that shirt through the adoration of Thorin. I don't want to get too into Lord of the Rings lore,
No, let's
but
well,
but for
but go ahead
sure,
and put it, because this is really interesting. I think to if someone is interested in these ideas, they should look at the Lord of the Rings anyway. So
yes.
entertain us.
And so Bilbo got the shirt because Thorin respected him for his efforts in The Hobbit. And so through adoration of Bilbo's spirit, which has been in The Hobbit both forthright, honest, but also competent, has gained him the ability to cloak himself in this invulnerable vestment And so when Goku gets it as a boon, it's not exactly an analog to the Dragon Ball in that same way, but it is also
Well, it's two
indestructible.
things put together, right? Because it's sat right behind the symbol of the turtle hermit, right? So it's
Well, yes, that's what I mean. I mean the Dragon Ball has a little more symbolism with it because Goku also gets other boons, right? He gets Sting, which is a whole nother can of worms that we won't get into because I don't want to get into the whole glowing when orcs are near and all that because that's a whole nother thing. But what I mean is that the protection element of it and the indestructible nature, because the vestment that that vestment that Frodo gets is also indestructible. Mithril is indestructible,
Right.
right? That's an element to it. And that indestructible nature is divine. And it comes from that paternal spirit that we see.
like the Dragon Ball.
Yes. And that's how Goku's able to live. It's not just luck. It's not just a gag. It's not just luck that he
Well,
lives.
it's actually, this one actually gets called out as a trope pretty often, right? Because there's always some representation of this somewhere where
well, what
a
should
mortal
we call...
wound is going to hit someone, and what they've inherited from their master or their mentor or their father protects their heart, right? It plays out that way, but it isn't usually used in a sense that it actually has anything to say. Whereas
that
with
has
Dragon
multiple
Ball,
layers, yeah.
with Dragon Ball, it's integrated,
Very.
so it's not just a trope.
Well, and that's the other thing. I don't want to say that tropes in and of themselves are bad. Like the chosen one trope, I don't actually think exists. I think the chosen one trope only exists
It's
in
a poor
bad
articulation of the sort of hero archetype.
things. Right. And it's something that's kind of been popularized in the last 20 years or so. That tropes are just something to be avoided, and if you have any tropes in your fictional work, then it's automatically bad.
That it's a sign of
After all,
unoriginality, right?
we've talked to our friend,
Yep.
the immortal man. We'll just call him the immortal man.
Yes. Our friend the immortal.
He addresses things in that manner, as if tropes automatically make things a bad way of storytelling.
Which is I just think that trope is a derogatory term now for people, where they say that it's it's derivative, it's unoriginal, it's whatever. You say, oh, it's like fridging is a trope, right? So to categorize something like the chosen one, aka the hero, with something like fridging and call them both tropes, I think diminishes the idea of the archetypal story quite a bit.
It really needs to be taken in with the context. Tropes can be expansive, they can be reductive, they can be simplified. Like, the whole idea of a trope is more of like a category. And to say that categories themselves are useless in and of themselves don't make any sense.
Well, categories are patterns, right? So it's to disrespect the idea of a pattern being there for a good reason.
Yeah, but like this pattern doesn't matter because we've seen it too many times. It's like, but what about the underlying pattern that you haven't seen?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say. So let's go ahead and continue. So next thing we see is Goku returns to his grieving friend. And he realizes that his grandpa saved his life, just what we were talking about.
Right.
He also remembers and realizes the path he must take after remembering Bora. He remembers Bora's strength. And his meaning to Upa. And also that spear sharpening scene. The meaning of traditions behind the patriarchal spirit that's inhabited by Bora is manifest here in Goku's memory.
Yes, this is what he focuses on while he's staring at the Dragon Ball.
Well, no, he hasn't looked at it yet. First, he's looking at Bora, but then after that,
well, when he's looking at Bora, he looks at the mound, right? So and this is the great thing about how Goku's eyes are, let's say, wide open, is that he takes in the meaning of the mound
right now.
upon seeing it right away, which is that veneration or that respect for that spirit, and that Upa has a situation that's similar to the shrine that he had to Grandpa Gohan, right? And so he immediately takes that in, and then starts to gaze into the Dragon Ball, right?
Right. What I was gonna say is that as he appreciates the present paternal spirit, he realizes that the greater paternal spirit, the spirit of the ancestral father, is what can redeem his situation. And so his gaze is drawn to the Dragon Ball in his hand, which is representative of that. And it's representative of the Axis Mundi, the cross, which bears the center of being, where suffering transcends into meaning.
Right. The point of maximal suffering. You are here, right?
Which is where he is right now because he hasn't experienced this kind of loss.
He has had
Who has died in Goku's journeys?
nobody, but a multiplicity of fathers has died simultaneously, right?
Mm-hmm.
The logo of his spiritual
But
father.
Goku squaring up with the murder of his own grandfather, we cannot get to
No,
yet.
not in this. But his spiritual
That's
father
massive.
being knocked off of his vestments at the exact same time that Upa's father has also been killed is like it's like an ego death type situation.
And so he realizes that he can no longer knowing the malice, and I like ego death, because knowing the malice he knows now that exists in the world, he can no longer continue as a carefree soul existing simply for play.
And for
And so
betterment.
notice
Self-betterment, I should say.
too, he doesn't use the Jenkin anymore.
Hmm. I
I
hadn't
don't know if you
realized
thought
that.
about that.
No.
Yeah, he
I hadn't
doesn't.
thought forward to that, but that's
Because his mode of being has transcended that now.
right.
It's no longer play. And so he decides that he will focus. And this is what you were talking about last episode that I wanted to get to,
Mm-hmm.
is that now, with the suffering he's experienced, he is able to redeem the spirit of the paternal by focusing his aim at something worthwhile. Up, he's focusing his aim upward towards the sky, and thinking that he can revive Upa's father.
So that's not necessarily what I was going for in the last episode, where I was saying sort of the the common humanity between the self and the stranger then sets up a common humanity that's symbolized by the pillar, and that having the ability to recognize that common humanity sort of redeems you in that sense that you become aware of your responsibility outside of yourself as a seed, right? Not necessarily in the redeeming of the father, but just of your ability to then orient yourself based on
No,
that
that's
idea, right?
exactly it. But that's what I'm saying. That orientation towards something higher than himself is accessed through the
But
spirit
it
of the
is through the
ancestral.
spirit of the father, right?
Yes, that's what I just said.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So
No,
that's
we're on
that's
the
what I was
same
getting
page.
to. So it's
No,
sort of
that's what I
like,
was wanting
yeah,
to bring up again, because you were saying it last time, and now it's kind of come to fruition with his gaze into the Dragon Ball and realizing that he can manifest his will in the way he can ask Shenron to defeat death, and by defeating death, he will ultimately accomplish the goal of the hero, which is the same, let's say, that Jesus Christ had when he was revived, in defeating death.
right. And that's why there's that sort of an analogous like going to the underworld and beating death, literally beating
Well,
death.
we'll get there
But yeah,
because
but
we
that's
got this.
oh
We
yeah.
got
But
this to
it
get
is
to.
funny because that's something that's not very well known about, let's say, Christianity. Is that that's an aspect of that, right? Of that
Well,
resurrection
I
story.
will
So,
say Catholics are pretty aware of it because Catholics
well, I should say non-denominational and Baptist and sort
Catholics
of.
celebrate Good Friday as like almost a mourning, because then Saturday is in mourning, and then Sunday is when like everything's
Hmm.
rejoiced. And Catholics even have a tradition before Easter that kind of is in that solemn mode of reverence towards that being
Right.
that
And it being 3
transitions
days,
from
right?
from the undeath to resurrection.
Right. And the 3 days is definitely significant. I just hadn't really considered that that direction also is
3
synonymous with just
days
finding
and
it as
3
the Father, right?
days. Yes.
Because it is sky. It's like at sky, you know.
Mhm.
Um but that also is synonymous with raising the with with honoring the spirit of ancestry itself, right? And it just so happens to be that what is actionable archetypally has always been the masculine, right? That which goes out and affects the world. And so that's why it's mapped onto ancestral masculine, right? The sun, the sky. But this is the pillar towards it.
And so Goku has to enter that sky
Right.
in order to surpass the present mode of being he inhabits. It's not just that he needs to climb it so that he can grow his biceps.
No,
That's not it.
he needs a new symbol. He has no
And
paternal figure
he
that he's
must
aiming
adopt
towards.
that which is outside of himself, meaning his journey to the west, to get the wisdom that he needs most from where he seeks least, let's say. And he didn't come here seeking wisdom. He came here so that he could honor his grandfather. But by that divine path, he was able to find the wisdom underneath the culture that existed here already, and now is ascending that knowledge for that has before been forbidden to him, let's say.
Exactly. It's sort of like once you have figured out what to do with it in context of yourself, then you must go out into the world and figure out what to do with it in the context of others.
And so that's how Goku goes. Meanwhile, this is when Red orders him
Right.
around. So meanwhile, back at the hotel in which um, Tao is staying, he receives a phone call from Commander Red, and Red says, "Get back there immediately. The soldier who we sent to get the Dragon Ball died, so get back there immediately." And Tao says, "I don't really care because you can't command me around." So he scoffs at the notion and says that he says 3 days, so 3 days it will be.
So the 3 days, it's synonymous with what we're going to see happening with Goku later on. We talked about the 3 days whenever we were making our Christ analogy. What's interesting about the 3 days that's kind of standing out to me right now is that um I don't want to get ahead of where we're at. At this point, Tao has gone and seen the tailor, right? And so he knows that it's going to take the tailor 3 days, right, to reconstruct his outfit. So this idea is that what he's done with the tailor, right, in his intimidation of the tailor, he's told the tailor, essentially, I am the greatest killer in the world. I live for killing, essentially. He doesn't know that it's malicious yet because of, well, I guess maybe the tailor gets an intuition of it because as he approaches him, he sees him revealed as he is, and he tells him, "You're going to do this for me in 3 days." So it forces the tailor to focus only on that one project, right? Makes him focus himself towards Tao Pai Pai's ends, right? And he's like, "You have 3 days to accomplish this thing." And so the tailor there is focusing as hard as he can on because he doesn't know if he can do it. And it's sort of like what you could intuit from it is that Tao Pai Pai is negotiating him down to only focusing on helping him rather than working on anybody else's projects. And that he's giving him the opportunity to essentially live to only focus on that one thing. So,
But isn't that what malice does when exposed to a society? Is that it focuses that, let's say, mass formation psychosis
mhm,
on that specific instance?
exactly.
And
So,
that's kind of what everyone beholds when Tao arrives in the town, right? They're all jaw dropped and their eyes are open and they're all staring at Tao. They're all focused on Tao in that same way.
right. So, but that's what he's set up here for the 3 days, right? Now he's sort of he's like the god of this town, right? Or he's the king, right? And that's why we saw um with his bath, right? There's a crown on top of that lion head on the faucet of his bath because he's made himself a little king here, and it's like that. How would I say? What's a mob to a king, right? Red here is trying to boss a higher spirit in a sense around, and I would say Tao doesn't answer to him because he's like, I'd like to call him a king because he is the master of his domain, right? He's the martial arts master of death, right? The greatest assassin in the world. So he is fully master. Like his hierarchy is a taller hierarchy than Red's hierarchy, which is more personal gain, right? Where he's going beyond himself towards an ideal of death. He's rejecting himself in that sense.
Interesting. I'm glad you brought the subject up because I also wanted to speak about it. Um, I think that the malice exhibited by Tao and the reason it has to be bought by Red is because Red's specifically what we're gonna see is Red's wish and um Red's meaning for being is something that is subordinate to the idea of death itself,
Hmm.
right? Or malice for gain. This is something that is only temporarily accessed by Red. And so of course he's not able to be tyrannical in the same way that he was with Blue and White.
Right, and it's to say I serve something higher than you, and he's literally serving it by having it rebuilt in his garments, right?
Yes. He prioritizes that, and that's exactly why he stays. Is he prioritizes his image as a worshiper of malice than being a subject to the will of Red.
Right. So it
I think
it's
that's
interesting how it's framed up that way because we're getting our first hints of the limits of Red's power, right?
this is the first time, the very first time.
Right. So you get this idea now that it's like if Goku can become stronger than Tao, then that would mean that in some abstract hierarchical sense, then he would have more strength of spirit, let's say, than Red does. And so this intuition that if Goku can accomplish what he wants to, then maybe that will actually make him stronger than the Red Ribbon Army itself.
And that Tao is already approaching that threshold.
Right.
All right, let's continue. So the last thing we see is that Goku climbs Korin's tower as day turns to night. He falls asleep climbing. When day breaks, he looks up only to see that there is more tower to climb, more road ahead of him, and that the journey is seemingly insurmountable. Just as he is tired and bruised, he thinks that he is at his end. He remembers, though, Upa's encouragement, but more importantly, Tao's condescension.
Mm-hmm. And then he curses Tao and saying, "I will become strong enough to beat you," and then continues to climb even
And why I
quicker.
say more importantly is the heroic spirit is more endangered by the adversarial spirit than it is encouraged by the potential spirit.
Right. And that has to do with the orientation that we're going to have Goku grapple with. One thing I want to point out is that also as he's climbing up, he slips and catches himself by his tail, and then he hangs there suspended upside down by his tail from the side of Korin Tower.
Yes. And that is to say that and that's why, we're especially getting into the territory where Goku's tail is going to transcend simply his hereditary benefits to the integration of what Goku's potential really could be.
Hmm. Well, I also want to make the analog to Odin there, right? Where there's the idea of Odin hanging suspended from Yggdrasil for 9 days, and he's punctured by a spear as well, right? And so this is, in my opinion, this is almost definitely a nod toward that mythology that Toriyama has done, with Goku hanging suspended here the way that he is. I think it's even canonically been confirmed that the inside of this pole is Yggdrasil. Essentially, it's a tree that grows and makes it taller. That's outside of lore. That's not something that's going to be covered necessarily in the episodes here. That's like a game that Toriyama has writing credit in or something. But that idea, right? I think he's very conscious of what he's doing with these little moments where, it's not a
But
joke, but it's a little moment that
but I don't want
he
to
gives
say
that
that
nod.
Goku hanging from it is just as Odin hanging from it,
No.
because it is a mention, let's say, to the sacrifice that the ancestral spirit has been making towards this, and it's that the hereditary benefit of the tale that Goku has had saves him from it, right?
But then he articulates it further, and it's not just a singular, like, two-dimensional thing he
Yes.
does, right? But I do want to point out, it seems to me as though it's a reference, almost.
Maybe, yeah.
Could be. It's
Maybe.
likely to be.
Well, I don't know if it's likely to be, because I would say, like, Jesus hanging from the cross, the Axis Mundi, right, is a similar thing from Odin hanging on Yggdrasil.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that that's exactly what's happening here. It's more of like this is what could happen. Like, you could hang here, you could be sacrificed to this idea of ascending, let's say, into the sky.
Well, thinking of it symbolically, whenever I see that someone is suspended, let's say hanging from the Axis Mundi, I would say that they are a conduit. They become synonymous with the Axis Mundi itself, and they
But Goku,
channel something.
unlike
And he hasn't done it
Odin,
yet, but this is symbolic
Okay.
of what Goku's trying to do by ascending
Yes.
the ladder,
Okay, yeah.
right?
Mhm,
And so he plays it out in a little moment here
Yes.
that I
okay.
think, as a nod, Toriyama would recognize what it would mean if he were to have him do it. Not that he's doing it in that single instance, but that is symbolic of what this journey even is, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to make it a little bit more precise.
We got to be precise in our speech. It's
Yes.
one of the things we try to do. Well, and that actually will bring us neatly to the end of the episode. Is there anything else you had to say, Brock?
I do like that you pointed out that what motivates Goku here is Tao's condescension, because we're going to see more condescension in the next episode.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be more motivation. Let's
Very
say.
motivating, yes.
Very motivating. Highly motivating. Well, I think we'll get into that next episode. I don't think I have anything else to say. We covered a lot in this hour. Thank you for joining us. If you are watching, I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock. And before we go, I do want to point out we are on Rumble.
So give us a subscribe.
We release on YouTube every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like what you heard. We try to keep a pretty regular upload schedule, and we'd like to hear you in the comments section. If you disagree with anything that we have to say, please let us know, because that dislike button does not actually work.
Nope. Also, we do release on Rumble and sometimes BitChute on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yes, of course.
So, okay, definitely. Thanks for taking that over, Brock.
Just wanted to make sure we get it out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was gonna plug it, but
Oh,
you
sorry.
beat me to it. No, yeah, you're good. You're good. All right, guys. Well, I think we hope you have a good night. I guess that's it, right?
Yeah.
See you guys next time.